We welcome our Chair, Honorable Dr. Justice S. Muralidhar, and our Co-Chair, Mr. Anil Kapoor. We also have with us today two panel speakers, Vivian Lord, Professor, University of North Carolina, and Marja Daruwala, Executive Director, Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. I kindly request our Co-Chair, Mr. Anil Kapoor, to give the memento to Honorable Dr. Justice S. Muralidhar as a token of our love and appreciation. We will now be presenting a memento to our co-chair, Mr. Anil Kapoor. I would now request our chair, Honorable Dr. S. Muralidhar, to address the gathering.
A very warm good morning to each of you. It's always a pleasure to be at the National Law University because one gets to interact with some of the brightest minds that we have now in the country. It's been doing remarkably well in this particular law university. And I have been particularly privileged to come here frequently to interact with the students. I'm glad to know that this conference is happening here and on a topic that's close to my heart. I've had wished to study it at some length. But it's an evolving area of study because much of what is happening around us now, particularly with the focus sharply on what's happening daily, makes us want to study this even more. There are endemic problems with the Indian judicial system and particularly the criminal justice system. And there are experts here whom even I'm waiting to listen to. I have seen it now from the perspective of a lawyer associated with the legal services companies from the legal aid movement for many years in the Supreme Court. And in the past 6 years, sitting as a judge in the Delhi High Court. I must say that the problem gets more complex as you go closer to it. It doesn't have easy solutions, but there is hope. There is hope that when we produce a better generation of lawyers with a greater deal of consciousness, who are prepared to come back to the bar to give of their best, that standards will improve. Because one common criticism that you will find when we talk of access to justice, particularly in the area of litigation, is that the best of the lawyers or lawyers with some degree of competence are not available to offer their services for the courts. And that, I'm sure, is a criticism that we'll have to deal with. In the Delhi High Court, I can share this with you that we've tried to incentivize participation of lawyers by assuring a reasonable degree of fees that can match that of the prosecution. I'm not saying that it's the best that can be offered, but it's definitely better than many states. If you talk to lawyers in other states outside of Delhi, you will immediately understand where the root of the problem lies. We haven't paid enough attention to encouraging participation of lawyers in the legal aid system in the way that the lawyers would want to be encouraged. So we do have a situation where the best of the lawyers are not available to do legal aid cases. That's one part of the problem. The other is the problem with the system itself, which is that there are far too many cases, institutions going far beyond what the holding capacity or the carrying capacity of the system is. So you have a huge waiting period. We are working from the point of view of the judiciary at streamlining the collection of data, collection of statistics on cases, using time management techniques, court management techniques, to see how we can prioritize certain kinds of cases and fast track them. It's not always easy to do that, but there is a very sincere attempt being made at different levels. It's not just at the trial court level, but also the levels of the High Court and the Supreme Court. And we are under constant watch. We are an institution that has to now deliver. There is a problem of matching resources with the available infrastructure. The status of our criminal courts, our prison systems are not very good. But there is a constant endeavor being made to improve them. And I'm sure conferences like this will throw up ideas for many of us to tackle. We've studied the system enough. I'm sure Professor Pandey will bear us out. We've got enough reports, enough commissions. We've studied it threadbare. And now is the time to act. And people are expecting us to deliver. There's a great deal of expectation from the judiciary. And there is a disenchantment about the delays endemic to the system. But I can only say that we're all working, and we're probably working overtime to make it happen. There is a lot to be done. As I said, we are hoping that with more law schools in the country, better minds coming into the legal profession, better ideas flowing in from all directions, we will be able to deliver. I'll reserve my other comments to after hearing the speakers, whom I'm actually impatient to hear now. Thank you. Thank you.
I will now request our co-chair, Mr. Anil Kapoor, to say a few words.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the law school for inviting me. You must all be wondering why I'm here and the actor Anil Kapoor is not here. I'm sure that's why so many of you, other than for our speakers, were so eager to come to today's session, and I'm sorry to disappoint. I am not that actor, but I will try to redeem myself as the session moves on. I'm a barrister that practices in Toronto. My practice is criminal defense work. I also do some prosecution work on behalf of the federal government and our provincial government, which is the state government, analogous to your state government. And I also am a lawyer that does national security work and intelligence work, acting for our intelligence agency on occasion, and dealing with terrorism cases and representing our agency in some of those, and acting against our agency as well in some of those cases, in a particular regime for federal courts that is called a special advocate regime, which I'm happy to share with you at some point during the course of the session. I also have some knowledge or first-hand experience with the legal aid system. I'm the chair of the area committee legal aid for the province of Ontario, and our responsibility is to determine who gets legal aid and who does not get legal aid. We have a fairly well-developed and too bureaucratized system for delivering legal aid, but I would be happy to share my views with you on how our legal aid system works, so that as you contemplate the construction or the betterment of your legal aid system, you do not make the mistakes that I think we may have made. And hopefully some of you who have thought about the delivery of legal services as a mechanism for access to justice will have some views that I can appropriate without attribution for use in our dealings in our legal aid system. I also want to put one marker in for the discussion today, that access to justice isn't simply about getting to courts. Getting into the court is not the whole story, it is only the beginning of the story. Access to justice is also about the ability to make meaningful submissions and influence the conduct and content of legal decisions. And I think that when we consider the scope of access to justice, we focus a lot on getting people into court, and rightly so, because that's the first step. But we cannot overweight that and ignore how we can influence the conduct of proceedings and the content of legal decisions. And with that, I thank you for inviting me. It's truly a great honor to come back to India, where my parents are from, and I enjoy coming here as much as I can. So hopefully in the future I will again. Thanks so much.
Alternative dispute resolution strategies, how they are similar and then their differences. First, mediation, and then restorative justice. To me, this mediation and restorative justice, among two methods, truly gives the everyday citizen access to justice. Before I begin on that, just a brief introduction about myself. I am here as a Fulbright Nehru Scholar. What that means is that around 1945, Senator Fulbright started some legislation that allowed scholars and students to go between the United States and to other countries. Today, there are about 155 countries that have Fulbright scholars and students in exchange both ways. Since 2008, the Nehru Fulbright is the largest. India has the largest exchange. There's about 200 of us that are here and also going to the United States. So if you're interested and you have students, gifted students, or you all are interested in the exchange, be glad to talk to you about it. So, the other thing that's important, I'm also a full professor at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and I'm affiliated with the University of Madras right now. That's as a Fulbright. I'm teaching victimology there, and I'm doing research. I'll be conducting research in the area of police. I am also, besides a full professor, I'm a certified mediator with the Superior Civil Court in North Carolina. And so with that, I'll begin to tell you a little bit about why this is so important. Our Honorable Chair just mentioned as far as the backlog in cases in court, and besides giving true access to the individual citizen, okay, I have such a loud voice, I don't know if you can probably, can you hear me back there? I'll try to use mine. It also is a way now in the states, and I'll be talking about North Carolina, mediation, arbitration are means to also reduce the backlog of cases in civil court and in family court. With just some exceptions, few exceptions, civil cases must go through mediation first. And I'll talk a little bit about evaluations that have been done recently about that. And same with family court. If divorce is, of course, much higher in the United States than it is in India, but if you have those type of cases dealing with custody or other type of disputes around divorce, they must go through mediation first. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that and how we get started. And let's see, how do I Okay, first, quickly, I'm sure most of y'all know what mediation is, but so we're on the same, more or less looking at things the same is, mediation is the use of a neutral third party to assist disputants voluntarily, critical, must be voluntary to reach a mutually acceptable settlement of the issues in dispute. So you have two or more parties who have a particular issue they're in dispute over. The mediator is a trained individual that will help them communicate, find the issues, consider options, and come up with a solution they all agree to. We consider it what we call in the United States, and I'm sure you've heard it, a win-win type of solution. Because sometimes the term restorative justice is used interchangeably, and it shouldn't be, I just want to make clear when I talk about restorative justice is that even though a trained neutral party is important for both of them, restorative justice is now used a great deal in the United States. It's also being introduced. We've had some exchange students from Germany and some other places, so they're beginning to move restorative justice into other countries. There, it's usually some sort of a criminal offense. You have somebody who is harmed. Clearly, you have an offender who has harmed a victim. And so it's the idea, though, of healing. Healing is accomplished through a cooperative effort where the victim volunteers to sit down, usually with her support or his support folks, and the offender has also volunteered to sit down. It puts faces on the victim, and it puts faces on the offender. And I know those of you all in here that are criminologists, we understand that offenders quite often were victims at one point too, and sometimes it takes away some of the fear of victims if instead of this dark hole of whoever hurt them, they become a person also. So when we look at some of the differences though, because there are differences, with mediation, it's a dispute is the main focus. You have people who have a particular interest and they need to discuss those, while restorative justice, you're addressing the harm from that offender. With restorative justice, the offender must first be the first one to talk and first has already said, yes, I admit it, I take accountability, I take responsibility for the harm, I'm willing to acknowledge that, I want to explain my story, and I'm already on the road of trying to do something about it. While in mediation, yes, you may have wrongs being done, and hopefully that'll come out, but it's really trying to resolve that differences between the disputes, which is important. In India, it may be particularly that you want to, the relationship, you want it to continue, and that may be an important part of your mediation, but still it's that differences that you're trying to resolve first. With both of them, it's face-to-face though. You have a victim sitting down, looking across the table at the offender looking across the table at the victim, with their support services, with their support systems. And mediation, at least it will begin with the parties sitting down and hearing each other's side of what their issues are. Now, in the United States, in most cases, and that may be true here also, I'm not sure, is that we usually will then go into what we call caucuses. Once each party has delivered what their primary issues are, then as a mediator, I will probably meet with them separately because there'll be things that they don't want to share with the other party, at least at first. And that's where we'll discuss it. But it still is the people that have the dispute are the ones involved. If it goes to court, it's not theirs anymore. It belongs to the court, it belongs to the judges. I'm sorry, the attorneys. But as the mediation, they're part of it. They have an opportunity to voice their feelings and experiences. In both cases, restorative justice or mediation, that mediator, that trained mediator, and I don't know if I have any, I'm just curious, is there any mediators in the room? Do I have anybody who's, oh, wonderful, I'll talk to you later. It sounds easy to remain neutral. I've had some cases, I'm sure you have too. It's something you have to work very hard at to stay neutral. It's not that easy. But that's the very central core of mediation, that and being a good active listener that can help facilitate communications. All right, so let me talk a little bit, those of you all, because I know it's a huge concern here as it is in the United States, is the massive backlog of of cases. The mediation program, they call it settlement conferences in North Carolina, have been in effect for about 20 years. They did a study at first, the most recent one is 2011. They had about, you can see around 19,000 cases in 2011. So around 900, around 1,000 of them were referred to mediation. Out of those, around 4,200 of them were resolved at mediation. That meant that those cases did not have to go and jam up the court system. They did not have to take more time away from those disputes, from their work and so forth. Another 25%, so another 2,500 of them were resolved. They did impasse, but because the issues were brought out, they never had to go to court because the attorneys continued to talk, and so they were resolved. So out of some 1,000 cases, only about 200 of them ended up going on. So about 800 of them never had to go to the courts. That's a lot of cases, at least in the U.S. They also, this study surveyed the attorneys, and even those that were at impasse, they agreed how important that mediation was to help get the issues out, to add to what was in discovery, and then get it resolved. So, mediation, benefits, bringing the issues out, facilitating options, moving past, we talk about interests versus positions. And I don't have time to get into that now, but that's huge. It's getting people off of their positions and actually getting down to their issues. Allowing a voice and quite often allowing relationships to continue. Resolve, then you can continue a working relationship, a family relationship, whatever. I do want to mention, because I have some concerns, and thankfully, you have, in the Chennai area, right, there's a pretty well-known judge, and I apologize if I don't pronounce his name correctly, Judge Saran Panchu?
He's a senior counsel.
Yeah,
He's not a judge, he's a senior counsel.
Oh, okay, I thought he was a judge. Okay, you know who I'm talking. Anyway, he's written a couple of books on mediation, and he's very.
The title of the book is called Settling for More.
Settling for More. Yes. And he says, you can use mediation for family disputes, no problem with that. But if there's a sense that violence has occurred, if you take nothing else away, please, that is an area that needs to go to court because of the idea of the harm involved. When victims are violated, they're abused, there's not the equal power that needs to be in a mediation situation. You do not have consent. At that point, you have coerciveness. So I would say, yes, it's important for family disputes where there's no violence, but mediation is not, family violence has no place in mediation. And I'll be glad to talk to you more about that later. Be glad to debate it with you, but I would like to make that very strong point. The other thing that I would like to mention, I don't know whether India has started this or not, but as you're moving into institutionalizing mediation, and I would strongly recommend it, it's important to, if you want to call it, immortalize. This is a book, and this is the latest edition of what's come out from North Carolina. It includes how mediations must occur, how they are brought down from the courts, how mediators should be paid, and very importantly, the ethical code that is part of mediation. And I'll be glad, this is the only copy I have of this, but I'll be glad to share it while I'm here. And I'd like to just briefly mention what they say are the values. Competency.
impartial, non-judgmental, confidential. Most people are willing to consider mediation because they don't have the publicity of open court, and the mediator must keep that confidential. Balance in power, it must be consensual on all parts. Nobody should be pressured into a solution. The parties resolve it is self-determination, and particularly important for those of you all that are attorneys in here is that if you're going to be a mediator, that you have no conflict of interest with any of the parties. You cannot be doing any other kind of business with any of the parties involved. As soon as you have that, then you're not impartial. Another thing that I think is important that may not be happening in India and might be useful information to you is that we can begin peacemaking early. And the United States, and it's not throughout the United States, but in North Carolina, we begin training young people in the 5th grade to be peer mediators. They are trained, they spend their own time learning how to be peer mediators, and they listen to their fellow friends' problems. These cases are referred by their guidance counselors, and they sit down with them, and they have done several studies, and it changes the school climate for learning, reduces disciplinary action, and increases self-esteem of the students. These are some of the disputes that they find appropriate. Harassment, rumor, gossip, cheating, stealing, vandalism, bullying. Now, if there are serious problems, drug problems, those sorts of problems, those are criminal problems and should not be. But I would strongly encourage you all to think about this. If we're going to change the world into a more peaceful place, it has to start young. And that's what we're trying to do, at least in North Carolina. And again, I'd be glad to talk to you more about this. Briefly about restorative justice, and I know I'm running out of time, but I do want to, we're using restorative justice particularly for juvenile cases, but also minor offenses. It has been used some for sexual assault cases, but I think in general most people find that it's not appropriate. It's just too hard to expect a sexual assault victim to sit across the table from somebody that has hurt her so badly. But for minor vandalism, pickpocket, some larcenies, they work pretty well. And again, the idea is that the offender first will say, yes, that night I realized this is what I did, I was on drugs, or I was so-and-so. The victim says, when you did that, I've since that point have not been able to sleep at night, you scared my family, so they're able to lay out what happened, and the offender hopefully may not actually come out and apologize, although that is something that you want them to be able to show remorse, but then say, I don't want to do this again, I'm now getting drug treatment, or I'm working on getting a job, whatever. So the victim's fear can be reduced. She will feel, or he will feel that he's hurt, and there's sort of mixed results on whether or not that offender reoffends. I'm not going to tell you it's a panacea, but it helps the offender. The victim seems to come out of it feeling much better about the situation, and that person feels less fear. So just quickly, and I'm almost through. When you look at our criminal justice system, the crime is a violation against the state, while in restorative justice, and again using it with juvenile cases is particularly appropriate, it's seen as a violation against people and relationship, and focuses on victim needs and offender responsibility rather than just punishment. So in conclusion, again, why I find this such an important, just incredibly important subject is we've got to start making peace. And we use conflict resolution at the macro level between countries, but we need to be starting it and doing more in our villages, using it to be more efficient in the courts for young people. and we can begin early teaching and using these to resolve conflict for positive development, restoration of relationships, and peace of mind. So maybe our next generation, my daughter, your sons and daughters, will consider alternative dispute methods to fighting. Thank you.
With permission of the chair and the co-chair, we will now begin with the presentations. Each presenter will get 7 minutes to speak. Our first presenter for the day, Ayush Pandey and Rangi Jain from Nirma University, Ahmedabad.
She has not shared, but we can with us. It's basic conceptual. I was expecting to see justice experiential. The absurdity is the idea of that is very strange. Very strange.
My name is Ayush Pandey. I am from Nirma University, Ahmedabad, and my partner is actually Ayush presenting. Second year LLB. As the theme of today is access to justice, I've named my topic as new pathways to access to justice. And the key notion which we will be using is the legal empowerment. My research has focused on access to justice through legal empowerment. Legal empowerment basically, what would we mean by legal empowerment? It's the critical knowledge of legal provisions and processes, coupled with skills to use this knowledge to respect and realize rights and entitlements of people. There are primarily two parts of legal empowerment. These are legal literacy and legal awareness. What do we mean by legal awareness? It's not some kind of legal professional education which a person uses to achieve some professional goals, but it's just to develop legal culture and consciousness. And this is what we mean by legal awareness. And legal literacy is a similar notion and targets the basic elementary knowledge of laws of the land and the country in which we live in. And when we combine these both, it results in legal empowerment. Why legal empowerment is needed? We need legal empowerment to tell the people that law is a friend and not an enemy. Generally, people think that laws are the tools used by the government just to have them, just to violate the rights. But we want to legally empower them to tell them that no, the laws are the weapons which our constitutions have provided you, and you need to use them to stop the violations done by the government or the other persons. Our constitution has provisions which are the laws provided for the people, like fundamental rights and etc. But till the stage when the people are not aware of them, people do not have the training to use these legal weapons against the injustices, they will not be able to use these laws for them, and that's what we are trying to say the legal empowerment does. It trains the people to use the legal weapons for their protection. As far as legal empowerment is concerned, it's as important as the existence of the laws itself. We have the several provisions for access to justice, but why do we need legal empowerment? Is that there are three reasons. We have some examples, like under Article 21, right to life, the right to free legal aid has also been included. But still, we can say that it's not being exercised, and we have Article 32, right to constitutional remedies, and in which any person can avail the services of Supreme Court if in order his fundamental rights are violated. But we have Article 32 and 226, which empowers the Supreme Court and the High Court to issue some writs in order fundamental rights are violated. And suppose, for example, the writ of habeas corpus can be implemented by the judiciary, which will question the accountability of the government if some particular person is missing, and the government has to answer within 48 hours to satisfy the person that what it's doing in protection of the rights, in protection of the person who's missing. So we have these provisions, but still without legal empowerment, these provisions will be wasted. That's I would like to tell. And because we cannot expect a rural or a tribal person who has no knowledge of law, we can't expect him to avail the free legal services under Article 21 if he doesn't have knowledge about it. Because in India there is, according to United Nations Development Index, the poverty level is 32.7%. They have categorized it that on the basis that the persons who are having $1.25 dollar per day, below $1.25 dollars per day as in their earning, they are considered as persons who are poor. And moreover, 67% of the people of India are the persons who are having their income at less than $2 per day. So we can't expect in a country like that for the people to know all these kind of legal provisions. That's why we are talking about legal empowerment, and now we're discussing about the ways by which we can enforce legal empowerment. But first let's discuss that government could implement the legal empowerment by education in two ways. By education, it can include legal knowledge materials and study. It can design the curriculum in such a way that within the elementary education only the basic legal information can be given to us. Like it does in the way of civics subject in the elementary education. But I'd like to mention that just that education in civics which we learn in our school days, it's not enough. And just in some books it's written about our fundamental duties and fundamental rights. It's just not enough because it's too fundamental basic education. We can't connect it to the real life problems and real legal problems, and we can't use them. We can't actually be empowered by just that bit of information. In our education system, so that's I would like to point out it's the major flaw in our education system, that the basic elementary education does not include enough legal study materials so that we can learn something substantial in the case of law to use them in our protection. I would also like to point out that the law has till now not been as a major subject for 10+2 students, like we have maths, science and arts. So that's also a major flaw which I would like to point out, which has not, that's a step which is yet to be taken by the government of India. And according to Indian Streams Research Journal, there was a sampling done of some around 100 schools, and the findings on that research was that 45.33% of children had the average legal literacy levels, while 28% had low literacy levels and 26.66 only had high legal literacy levels. So that's still a large number. So 28% is still a large number which needs to be reduced down for the people who are in low literacy levels. It has also been noticed that a systemic, we can see that a systemic change is required and not just a legal one, like in the case of D.K. Basu, where the prisoners' rights were told by the judiciary, and there were certain guidelines issued by the judiciary for which directed the prison authorities for the protection of prisoners' rights. But we still see that those are grossly violated because there are approximately 2 lakh under trial prisoners in the country, and they are facing a lot of issues like health problems, sexual abuse, etc. etc. I would like to say that people's participation is really required if we want to increase the level of access to justice. Like in the case of Right to Information Act, it was started as a movement of central Rajasthan illiterate villagers fight for minimum wages with the slogan "Hamara Paisa, Hamara Haq, Hamara Hisab." When they went to the government to increase their wages, the government told them that they could not increase the wages policy and they could not even discuss it with the villagers because it's confidential. Then the villagers realized that the transparency and accountability in the government is really important, and thus they fought for this level, and which came to the implementation of this act of Right to Information Act. So I'd like to say these new pathways, the National Legal Services Authority, NGOs like Multiple Action Research Group, these are some of the instruments which provide us with this legal empowerment, which are working for legal empowerment by legal awareness campaigns, legal literacy campaigns, and several legal trainings. I would briefly mention their contributions in the field that NALSA, National Legal Services Authority, has actually made their policy that the free legal aid will be provided to these following class of people which come to them, like mentally ill people, trafficking victims, under trial prisoners, poor people having 12,000 or lesser annual income for going to Supreme Courts, and having 9,000 or lesser incomes for going to the other courts. They also enforce lok adalats. Lok adalats they have three purposes for introducing lok adalats. They target settlement of cases at pre-litigative stage. And that's all right to the two things.
Our next presenter is Madhuri Sharma, Punjab University, Chandigarh.
Institute of Legal Studies, Punjab University, Chandigarh. I'm here to talk about from criminal-centric to victim-centric imperatives of criminal jurisprudence. Since times immemorial, our criminal justice system, our criminal jurisprudence has been evolving over criminal-centric issues like investigation, identification, and punishment of the wrongdoers through religious, social, and judicial sentencing. Now, cartographed under the principles of homo homini res sacra, homo homini lupus est, and lex talionis, the whole edifice of our criminal justice system have been stood erected on the pillars of retribution and deterrence. But with the emergence of Benthamite legal ethics of reforms, the principles of homo homini res sacra and natural justice have guided us to construct two additional pillars of prevention and reformation through the instrumentality of constitutional remedies, Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, and other specific laws. But all throughout, focusing upon our penological aspects, we have neglected the other equally important side of criminal jurisprudence relating to the incessant suffering of the victims. Now, talking about the evolution of our criminal justice system, our criminal jurisprudence, it has shifted from monstrosity to humanity. Now, there has been a logical fallacy that it is an acknowledged fact that when our judicial thinkers, our constitutional thinkers, our dispensers, they started pondering over the criminal justice issues, their attention was completely drawn on crime, criminals, and punishment. Obviously, they were spurred, they were ignited by the public outcries, their anger for bringing the guilty to book. In fact, public has always perceived punishment to be synonymous with justice. It is, and this is clearly evident from the unparalleled and unprecedented brouhaha over awarding of death penalty or even surgical incarceration or public stoning of the gang rapist of Damini, 23-year-old physiotherapist Damini. Now, instead of finding out ways and means for providing relief to the living victimized kith and kin of Damini who suffered irreversible injury, the public disdain stands concentrated on loud chantings, "We want justice, we want justice, and we want justice." More often than not, the justice dispensers were religious pontiffs, drawing their strength from a number of audios. Now, there has been a paradigmatic shift with the passage of time, with the emergence of Benthamite legal ethics, with the emergence of thoughts of Voltaire, Charles Louis, Montesquieu. Bentham realized that harsher punishments were no guarantees for the decrease in the rate of crime. Therefore, criminal jurisprudence, it began to adopt the philosophy contained in the dictum homo homini res sacra, that is, man is the temple of other man, and natural justice for making criminal justice system more humane and effective. It is in this broad framework that Justice J.S. Kariwal, he has stated that our criminal justice system is erected basically on 4 pillars. The first pillar is the police, then the prosecution, then the trial courts, and then the jails or the reformatories. In Indian context, what happens is that the state relating to the criminal justice are governed, guided, and monitored by several legal lighthouses like the Constitution of India, the Indian Penal Code, the Code of Criminal Procedure, etc. Also the principles of natural justice have been evolved. Now, besides besides this, what happens is that the criminal justice the system, the criminal jurisprudence, it develops upon the concepts of mens rea and mitigating factors while deciding the quantum of punishment. Our constitution, it contains a number of articles which, like Article 14, 32, 226, and especially Article 21 for protection of our life and liberty through invocation of extraordinary writs and grants, implicit and explicit sanctions for operations of the police, the trial courts, etc. But what happens is when we look into these provisions, what happens is we notice that there has always been a criminal-centric trend towards in these provisions. The first operational agency, that is the police, it spends most of its time on investigation, identification, nabbing and arrest of the victims of the criminals. The prosecution concentrates on evidentiary aspects to be presented before the trial court. The trial court is busy in ascertaining the category into which the crime has to be put in. The jails concentrate on the safe custody of the criminals. During all these processes, what happens is the poor victim, either he has to rid under the weight of police investigation, medical treatment, tricks of the trade by the legal professionals for years and years without seeing any sort of light at the end of the legal tunnel. Now, it is very strange that when our constitutional and legal luminaries were debating upon the Indian Penal Code, the Indian Evidence Act or our Criminal Procedure Code, they did not look at the other side of the crime, that is the plight and rights of the victims. Now, whenever we see these provisions of the Criminal Procedure Code, the Indian Evidence Act, what we see is that it has very less to offer regarding the victims. If we look at certain provisions of the Indian Evidence Act, like it has been provided under Article 13 of the Indian Evidence Act that the witness have to face any question which is related to the cause of the crime, but at the similar time, simultaneous provision has been provided under Article 161, subsection 2, that the witness has a right to remain silent on certain questions. So these are altogether contradictory provisions. Also, the crime, also under the Indian Penal Code, crime has been categorized as cognizable, non-cognizable. What happens is these provisions are more or less are favoring the criminals rather than the victims. There has been, what I would like to focus is that there has been a parliamentary inertia. The legislative wings, they have fallen prey to the vested interests of the international lobbyists, the business tycoons and imperatives of coalition politics. There have been repeated disruptions in the parliament, the reprieve to the criminals by successive governments. There have been a lot of electoral factors in it. But the silver lining is the judicial succor for the victims. Manifestation of judicial activism. The judiciary is coming out with many heartening silver lining judgments. The judiciary has started providing for compensatory measures. Like I have quoted a number of cases wherein the judiciary has started providing compensation to the victims along with the punishment. And there has been a shift from the criminals to the victims. There have been a lot of government initiatives by passing of a number of bills. The government rose to the occasion and appointed a Manivat committee, and there has been a lot of recommendation provided by this committee. I would like to quote some like the right of the victim to be included as a party in certain select cases. Even the voluntary NGOs should be included as they should be provided a right to implead. Justice Verma's recommendation these days, it has been a current topic, and it has been penal-centric. These are some of the recommendations which are provided by Justice Verma, but what the government protective umbrella, but still these recommendations, they are just bottlenecks. There has been dilly-dally on Vishaka guidelines. Their monetary compensations are either too meager or time taken by the courts is too long. Talking about the conclusion of my paper, what I would like to suggest is that of late, many of the state governments and even our central government, they have been providing relief to the victims and even jobs to the victims, wherein the responsibility of the states is indisputable. But there is no comprehensive legislation or statute in this regard. Therefore, I suggest that the judiciary must take many steps forward to revamp the criminal justice system in favor of the victims. If the parliament does not come out with a criminal injuries compensation board, the judiciary must come out with broad parameters for determining the adequate compensatory mechanism for the victims. Already such courts have been established in some of the Western countries and they could be well suited in the Indian context as well. Now, since our parliamentarians, they have provided us with enviable tools like the Constitution, the Indian Penal Code, the CRPC, etc., but nothing has been done to plow in the fields of victim-centric criminal justice system. Perhaps it will be another feather in the cap of our awakened judiciary when it comes out with parameters and guidelines, when it comes for creation of victim rehabilitation court on the lines of IPC, victim rehabilitation right procedure court on the lines of CRPC, so that a criminal justice system works both for prevention of the crime as well as it brings out the traumatized victims back to the normal conditions. I suggest during the course of the trial proceedings, there should be the bench should be expanded and it should include victim rehabilitation experts for all-inclusive instant justice, where state is responsible for causing loss to life or limb. Clear and time-bound directives should be provided for short and long-term requirements, and in the cases where the court recognizes that the accused who's been held guilty has sufficient means to pay to the victim, adequate compensation should be provided to the victims, and civil society are non-governmental educations. They must join heads, hearts and hands so that there should be a full flowering of a criminal justice system. Thank you.
We have a very basic principle that every accused person is innocent until they are actually proven guilty. And in your presentation, you seem to make a suggestion that the accused have too many rights. And I'm wondering if you agree that people accused in your system have too many rights and not enough rights for the victim.
1 minute.
Even we do have such provision in our criminal justice system that the accused, before he is being pronounced as guilty, there's a presumption of innocence. What I have focused on my paper is that these provisions they are basically criminal centric because the victim, the other equally important side, the victim, he is totally being neglected. His rights are being violated. Because we are, through these provisions, what is happening these days is the criminals are using these provisions for their benefit, for their side. That is what my paper is focusing upon, that there should be a tilt from criminal centric to victim centric, and the equally important side, the incessant sufferings of the victims, they must also be taken care of.
Madhvi, there is a question for you. In India, the plight of accused is as bad as victims. In most cases, they suffer all kinds of high-handedness of the system because of variety of violation at different stages. So, in that context, to what extent your observation is correct when you say revamping criminal justice system in favor of victims? So you are for revamping the system in favor of victims, or you are for balancing the rights and balancing the rights of victim and the rights of accused in a criminal justice system?
Basically, what I through my paper wanted to suggest was that instead of focusing completely on the
Second observation, revamping criminal justice in favor of victim.
Exactly.
It is extreme.
Not exactly extreme. What I wanted to say was, instead of totally criminal centric, it should be balanced in favor of the victims as well.
Good.
I would just request we take all the questions in the end.
Okay, fine.
So that we'll have.
Our next presenter, Akshay from Amity Law School, Delhi.
Good morning, all of you. Myself, Akshay Pathak, second year student of Amity Law School, Delhi. And it's a personal pleasure to present my paper titled Myth of Justice in India before all. Law is supposed to herald social change, meet the needs and aspirations of people. The aim should be not only to provide access to law, but access to justice. But I would not hesitate in bluntly pointing out that laws today in today's scenarios are just like cobwebs, where the small flies get caught, get trapped, and the bigger ones break through. Our Indian Constitution, Article 39A, mentions equal opportunity to justice for everyone. But let me put forward to you a very simple question, that does it make sense in asking for justice if justice delivered is not even worth obtaining? The equal ability of everyone to access those procedures which are established to enforce a person's rights, I believe have been overemphasized. Why I am saying this is that there is a clear distinction between what is access to law and what is access to justice. Now, talking about access to justice, what I personally believe that access to justice does have an implied meaning in providing speedy redressal of the grievances of the people. Now, talking about India, we have a huge backlog of cases. We already know around 3.5 crore cases are still pending in Indian courts. So, in such a scenario, it's imaginable that a person, a poor litigant who comes from underprivileged who belongs to underprivileged class, he would prefer leaving up the litigation than spending his entire life running from pillar to post just for justice. Now the main reason which is behind this backlog of cases, not the main reason, but one of the most important reasons I would point out is the dismal judge population ratio. In India, talking about India, it's just 13 per million population. Comparing this judge population ratio with other countries, talk about Australia, it's around 42. Talk about UK, it's around 51. And United States, it's around 107. Even though the population of those countries is much lesser compared to India. Even the apex, our Supreme Court, in the decision of, in the third All India Judges Association case, strongly mentioned that the time has come that Indian judiciary must reform itself. And the first step it has to take is to reform itself by improving this dismal judge population ratio from 13 to 50 per million population. Now, another thing I would like to mention is the issue of repeated adjournments. I would like to suggest that the court must come up with a strong stand that small reasons like the inconvenience caused to the advocates, they must not hinder the mandate or what has been prescribed under section 309 of the CRPC, which talks about the power of the courts to adjourn the proceedings. Another thing is that we have a habit of only accusing judiciary of delaying the justice. But what I personally believe is that there are a number of other reasons which we often ignore. For example, the delayed investigations, the slipshod investigations, the unscientific investigations. There are cases in which even judiciary is left helpless. It cannot do anything. And as we all know, the investigation and the collection of evidence is done by the same agency. So, what I personally would like to suggest is that we can, can create separate departments which should be entrusted with these separate tasks. Now, coming to another very important point, we have been talking about access to justice to the marginalized class. I would mention a topic, a project on access to justice for marginalized people, which started functioning in the scheme started functioning in 2009, and in current phase it has to work from 2013 to 2017. But it is very unfortunate that it is operating in merely 7 states and it covers just 87 districts. So in such a scenario, we cannot expect such a scheme to be successful. I would like to suggest that I accept that it's a good initiative, but the scope of such initiatives or such schemes must be widened. As I've already mentioned in my papers, things are not what they appear to be, and the things behind the scenes, the story behind the scenes is completely a harsh one. One more thing which I forgot to mention is that there have been debates, I would call academic debates, that which branch of which organ is primarily responsible for providing justice or about the justice mechanism. But I would mention that in India we have rule of the constitution, rule of law, and not of a particular organ. So the question of predominance of any particular organ at any cost is futile. We cannot entrust a particular organ to provide justice to any victim. It is very unfortunate, but I would remark that justice in real meaning and in real sense still continues to be a myth in our nation. And I would like to conclude by saying that the gradually deteriorating confidence of a common man in the justice mechanism must be restored at any cost. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Asam Wangale, National Law University, Delhi.
What does a parent from one of India's historically marginalized caste sections do when his child is not allowed to sit with others in the class? Or during the midday meal, his dishes are kept separately from that of others? Whom does a young woman turn to when a health worker refuses to enter her house? This is a reality after 60 years of our Indian independence. Heartiest good morning to one and all present here. I am myself Asam Wangale from National Law University, Delhi, second year PLLB student. The topic of our paper is Access to Justice, Outlook into Issues and Solutions for Marginalized and Minority Communities in India. I will be using this podium to discuss three basic issues today. First is the definition and meaning or the concept of what justice actually is. We actually base our assumptions or our thinking, is sorry to say, but only on the Western thinking of the concept of justice. We should also understand what is the Indian concept of justice means. Second will be an overview of Access to Justice program initiated by UNDP, that's United Nations Development Program, and critical analysis of it and analyze what are the limitations of that program, and also to come upon the suggestions for the same. And at the end, provide some recommendations. To start with, as Frederick B. Underwood states, what is the notion of justice in India? Justice in India is a human expression of a wider universal principle of the balance between men and nature. The wider concept that has been going since the Vedic period has been that if a person acts justly with the nature and the laws of nature, then the whole environment will be just. Moving further, I've analyzed basically the justice system in US, Canada and India as to what are the basic objectives such countries have in the particular jurisdiction. The US Department of Justice established the Access to Justice Initiative in 2010 and has these three basic principles enshrined. Number one is promoting accessibility, second is ensuring fairness, and third is increasing efficiency. Canada Bar Association has given the top priority for past several years advocating the same aspect. Focus of the association is on providing access to justice to the poor people who are denied access or who have already been disadvantaged, which include women, refugees, and etc. Moving further, in order to evolve a definition of what justice is, one might easily say a path to get justice, access to justice can mean that in one word. Another can be that individuals' access to court or a guarantee of legal representation to marginalized and minorities free of cost. This can be a very comprehensive definition of access to justice. Moving further, concept of justice primarily necessitates a potential system securing suitable legal remedies within civil and criminal jurisdiction. Now, as stated by V.R. Krishna Iyer, prominent jurist of our country, that access to justice being the most fundamental and the human right that everyone should have. Moving on further, now I'll be coming to the major part of my paper, that is the analysis of access to justice. Access to justice for marginalized people, the UNDP initiative which was started in 2009. The basic, as my brother mentioned right here, is functioning in 7 states and in 87 districts. The basic objective of this particular UNDP program in collaboration with the Justice Department of the Government of India is, number 1, supporting national and local justice delivery institutions. Second, enhancing legal awareness among women and men belonging to marginalized group. Marginalized group here are the poor, are the most downtrodden section of society, etc. Other basic objective is a cadre of young lawyers should be trained and sensitized to assist men and women from marginalized communities. Training of judges in partnership with state judicial academies on the issue of affecting marginalized communities, and strengthening legal aid clinics in law schools so that students can be more involved in enhancing legal awareness among communities. There has been various steps, and as we know that under Article 39A of the Indian Constitution, which is the directive principle of state policy, we clearly mentioned of providing free legal aid to the needy people. Moving further, there has been various enactments and mechanism by the Government of India for providing access to justice for such people. The basic lacuna is the main that we should focus, because unless and until we do not discuss the problem and provide an effective solution, we cannot kill the disease. This is the point. Moving further, discussing the blockades of the system, there are basically 5 major blockades that are faced in this particular program. Starting with, first is lack of awareness of legal rights and obligations. Second is lack of source and availability of advices. It's a very important thing. Third is financial burden of litigation is also a major factor. Long delays in adjudications, excessive number of laws, and additional barriers to access to justice. As there was someone said here that it should be the role of judiciary to provide more number of judges. So I to say it's the function of government to appoint judges, number of more judges. Judiciary is just to provide the judgments and the legal help to the court. So we should urge the government basically to have more number of judges and have more efficient judicial system by adopting reformatory methods. Moving further, I would like to have, I would just like to read some recommendations at last. To conduct an independent evaluation of the impact of such justice programs. Basically what we do is we do not see what is the impact such kind of a UNDP program or such kind of schemes are doing on the people. Whether they are actually reaching there or not. First is there should be an independent and a real evaluation as to how much these schemes are benefiting people, and accordingly we should review the functioning of such working programs every year. We have a National Access to Justice Commission under the head of the central government, which will actually address the issue at much larger scale. Another is to spread awareness among the students from marginalized communities since class 8 onwards by amending curriculum, which may include brief outlook about various rights that such people have and how to access to this legal rights. Now, concluding, let's have a perspective. If we think that we all humans develop a sense of just morality between us, the notion of discrimination, and give away the notion of discrimination from our heart and from our mind, although the problems wouldn't cease to exist, but I can surely say that we will become less evil and much better Homo sapiens. Thank you.